Welcome to CPD Live. I'm Jan Henderson, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating this discussion, which focuses on drainage. Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, InDesign Media acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And now to today's discussion. Drainage has developed significantly over the years. Innovations like the linear drain have not only provided specifiers with effective ways to prevent flooding, inundation, and subsoil degradation, but also opened up fresh design possibilities. But what are the relevant regulatory requirements regarding drainage? What practical considerations should specifiers be aware of? And what are some of the best design solutions available right now? This session, entitled Key Considerations When Specifying Drainage, will answer these questions and more. By the end of this session, you should be able to identify the relevant code requirements that relate to drainage, evaluate practicalities involved with choosing and installing drainage, apply knowledge and troubleshoot problems associated with drainage installation, identify and define design solutions that conform to the code requirements, and evaluate and apply knowledge for the best environmental outcomes. Today's session starts with a 40-minute discussion, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. And if you'd like to ask any of our speakers a question, please send a text through the Q&A field at the bottom of your screen. Today we have two speakers on our panel, and I'll be moderating. Welcome to Troy Creighton, Managing Director of Stormtech, and Max Rafferty, National Technical Policy Manager, Master Builders Australia. Firstly, to you, Troy, could you tell us a bit about Stormtech? What does your business do and who are your clients? Considering today's topic as key considerations when specifying drainage, can you talk us through some of your recent projects?
Thanks, Jan. So Stormtech was started by my father in 1989. Drainage came to us as a solution for our own business. Dad was a concreter and we needed a more elegant solution than your simple cast iron ladder grates in a channel drain. So Dad's inventions spurred the way for architects and engineers and builders to look at drainage in a different way. And one of the key things that Dad helped develop was the shower channel, which has become certainly a global success. Recent projects, Barangaroo Roof would be one that most people are familiar with. We've done everything from bathroom drainage through to courtyard driveway drainage, underground, and even some underwater grills and grates that I've only recently found out about.
Fantastic. And Max, can you tell us a bit about your role at the Master Builders Australia organisation?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Look, my role as the National Technical Policy Manager with Master Builders, it involves providing, technical advice to the Australian Building Codes Board. I sit on numerous Australian standards, and I also host a Master Builders podcast. So that gives you a little bit of a all-round picture of me.
Great. Thanks so much, Max. And now to our discussion. Thanks, Troy. Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Jan. Well, everyone, I'll step right in. So obviously, key considerations about our drainage. I'm going to focus on two areas, and it's pretty obvious. One is stormwater drainage, and the other one's sanitary drainage. What can they be made from? So before we get to the drains, we really need to have a bit of a fundamental idea of what we can make our drains from. For stormwater, there's quite a list here, and as you can see, for roof drainage, so it's not what I do, although we will do rainwater heads and so on where people need a custom solution. There's a huge variety of materials that you can do your roof drainage from. So why can you use a large variety of materials in roof drainage? Mainly because they're not in the ground, they're less exposed to the conditions, the really nasty conditions that in-ground drainage is exposed to. As you'll see, in-ground drainage is quite a limited range of materials. And one of the things I picked out from going through the materials and so on is that chains should not be used as downpipes, which is a bummer because I always liked that idea. I thought it was a fantastic fantastic little feature, but can't do it anymore. So here we have copper. We have stainless steel over copper in this application. There we have PVC. You'll also see that sometimes there are materials that, although you're allowed to use, you can't use them together. So things like copper and zinc, copper and lead, and so on, they can be used, but in a specific method. Now, for stormwater drains, non-pressure, you see the list is quite a bit shorter. And when they're saying aluminized, so a bit of an Americanism has crept into our standards there, that's a galvanized or a like a zinc alum style material, not aluminium. We'll get into that quite specifically later. And these materials are all tried and proven over many decades. See, we have some PVC pipe. There we go. You have your large culvert style. This material, just to give you an idea, typically that's used as a formwork as well. And then we have everyone's favorite, the concrete pipe. So as I mentioned, why are some materials important? Well, some aren't suitable. It's that simple. So if you look at gunpowder, it's not suitable as a drainage material, nor is paper mache. And I think really it's quite obvious. So aluminium in concrete, tile and pavers or stone is not suitable due to the alkalinity. So this is one of the times when you see something, you think, oh yeah, aluminized is okay, but it's not. So the Aluminium Council of Australia and the Australian Window Association did a joint technical bulletin. This is available in the summary. I can email it out to anyone that wishes. It's contained in there. Primarily, aluminium is stable in a pH range of about 4 to 8.5. And why is that important if we're not talking about a swimming pool? Well, bricks, concrete, stone, tiles, they generate waters of between 10 and 13. 13 when concrete's fresh, 10 once it's cured, which is still above the 8.5. And bear in mind, this is the Aluminium Council and the Window Association, so the true experts of this. So this issue, as you can see here, where you're getting crevice corrosion, this issue needs, like a really good dinner, it needs a recipe to be adhered to closely. So you need alkaline waters above 8.5, and you need stagnant water, as in stagnant water is water that is depleted of oxygen. So just think of your smelly pond or something that you've stumbled across in the bush, or you've lifted up a paver and seen some stagnant water under there. It's depleted of oxygen. So what happens then is the water depleted oxygen then attacks the anodizing layer, which is anodizing, no magic there, boys and girls. It's just simply aluminium oxide that's force grown. They put it in a bath, they run a current through it, and they force grow the aluminium oxide. So key word in there is an oxide. What happens with the stagnant water in the alkalinity range that aluminium doesn't like is that stagnant water starts to hydrolyze the oxide out of the aluminium, and then the aluminium eats itself in this environment. And that stagnant water, because it's depleted of oxygen, can turn into one of two things. One, a mild sulfuric water, so a very mild sulfuric acid, and you get the rotten egg smell. Or the other one, if there's salts around, it can be a hydrochloric acid. Very, very mild. You're not going to burn yourself with it, but it'll certainly eat the aluminium. Aluminium and galvanic corrosion. So aluminium is really corrosion resistant because it is so reactive. It conducts a current very, very efficiently, very well. Most of the power lines we see around, they're actually aluminium core, not necessarily copper. That's the above ground power lines. So when you put a different metal, a harder metal, with the aluminium will corrode on behalf, it will sacrifice itself before the harder metal, like a steel or stainless or so on. It'll corrode quicker or instead of that material corroding. Good example of that would be your zinc alum roof. the zinc and aluminium coating over the steel substrate is sacrificial. It corrodes because it's softer than the steel underneath. That simple. Stormwater from the code. So here we have out of AS 3500. This is part 5.3.1.2. Straight out of 3500, stormwater from other than roof areas shall be collected and conveyed via stormwater channels and inlets to site stormwater drains. I've shown some wonderful pictures of linear drains here. This one is the drill core library in South Australia, Core 10 facade, and we actually did the drains out of Core 10 to match up. We do have, yes, tea staining, the rust is washed onto the pavers. And entry into buildings. Stormwater shall be prevented from entering doorways. So heads up everyone, NCC 2022, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's coming up with some mandatory requirements about accessibility in a lot of new areas. So these are going to be more on your mind than they have been in the past if they haven't been. Keep takeout, graded drains shall be designed and placed across ramps and entrances to intercept any flow which would otherwise drain into the building. Oops. I've gone and touched something I shouldn't have. Next slide. There we go. So some common stormwater applications. Driveways. You don't want your water going into the garage, typically. Balconies. We've got something specific to talk about balconies. Courtyards is another good one. Linear drains, obviously, they make doing courtyards a lot easier. Pools. We have something specific to talk about pools for you about. Paved areas, roof decks, thresholds, again, thresholds, fun part. So some detail for driveways. If you're doing a linear drain from a driveway, try to step it out from the driveway.
Troy, can you stop you for a second?
Yep.
The slide hasn't changed. We're still on the stormwater from the code slide.
Oh, okay. Stormwater applications. Hang on. I'll just I'll try that one. Did that change it? Or are you still on stormwater?
It hasn't changed, Troy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to the I'll just go, won't let me go up to display settings. Instead of rushing, I'll just take a moment, everyone. Apologies for mucking you around here. Does that change anything? No?
Troy, I think you might want to stop screen sharing and then restart it again.
Yep. Starting. And there we go.
While Troy's looking at that, for those of you who are interested in seeing the requirements around door thresholds in the latest, there's a public comment draft for the National Construction Code, which you can find on the Australian Building Codes Board website.
Thanks for that, Max. That's great. So we'll just get onto the scribe. It looks like things are working now, Troy.
Yep.
That's great. So just move on to where you were and we can pick that up. It's very interesting. So let's yes, fantastic.
Moving on to driveways. So in front of a garage, try and keep the drain, if you're using a linear one in particular, about 300 to 600, so 1 to 2 feet in old speak, away from the garage door, and you slope from the garage door down to the drain. Try and avoid having the drain too close to the door. That's just purely for surge when you get your peak rain event. If there's any downstream blockage, typically in your municipal stormwater that you're filling up, sometimes it takes a moment for it to catch up with debris that it's pushing through and so on. Now, load rating, I would suggest a minimum class B for any driveway because cars are getting bigger and heavier with four-wheel drives and so on. But also with the rise of home delivery being more and more frequent. A lot of these smaller courier trucks, they are Class B, and it's the front wheels, the steering wheels, that carry the heaviest load, and they're the ones typically going to be going over a drain if you have one in your driveway. Here we have different low classes that we make for, so these were the most fun ones to do when we did the A380 ones. And some points about balconies. So spitters as a main drain on a balcony are now generally prohibited. There are some jurisdictions that still allow it, but they are very, very few. But a spitter as an overflow is still permitted, and in many cases is actually required. But the balcony should contain the water to an outlet and this into the stormwater system. Now I'm going to hand over to Max here. This is a new and emerging area. So Max, I'll let you take it away, buddy.
Thanks, Troy. Look, what we're looking at here is a pedestal paver over a raised balcony. They're a great solution. I'm sure many of you have seen them. They're a great way to get a level threshold when moving from inside to outside. It should be noted that whenever you're going to look at implementing this type of system, you should always be looking to engage a hydraulic consultant to make sure there's adequate drainage allowed for, and to also consider the overflow. A few key points with this around ensuring waterproofing is protected from the pedestal which the paver is sitting on. Also ensuring that the raised paver tiles still fall away from the building or the door. Due to the narrow gap between the pavers and tiles, water may still not drain freely from the surface to the underside where the water is collected. One of the beautiful things about these systems is that they allow for access and easy maintenance, particularly for clearing drainage, also repairing membranes if there happens to be any damage.
Oops, sorry, I jumped ahead.
Look, and the point around the ease of drainage between the gaps in the tiles, I mean, clearly where you have got these sort of tiles sitting out on a balcony, you don't want a massive gap. You don't want people, falling through it or tripping, creating trip hazards. So you do always want to make sure that your hydraulic consultant is aware, you know what the spacings between those are, the adequate spacing to actually collect the amount of rainwater that is likely to occur onto the surface. So one of the other parts that should be considered with these type of systems is around a free drain, around drainage rate at the threshold, which will also help manage any issues with water buildup and allow for drainage before any of that potentially enters the building. These drainage grates are fantastic at the threshold because they also allow you to get access to the door tracks for maintenance.
And now we're moving on to courtyards. Thanks for that, Max. So courtyard drainage suggestions. So number one, as designers, choose the one that suits the look you want, but check with us to see how resistant it is to the entry of debris for any blockage. So plants in pots, garden beds that are raised or on ground, they can all contribute to blocking drains. This is in Melbourne, someone's own little futsal course that they've put together. And because of this very specific artificial turf that they've got down, they needed a specific drain and design so that we could try and keep the sand and put it back on the turf. There's quite a bit of work to do with that one. where we're talking about the garden that you're expecting the client to want to have around there, different grates can control the debris and still function even though they might look partially blocked. Obviously, this one here is about to be completely blocked, so maybe not the most suitable one for that application. Now, pools. Pools are an interesting one. I only recommend 316 electropolished stainless as it is most durable. Electropolishing the stainless increases its corrosion resistance. Now, stainless is not as conductive as you might imagine. By conductive, I mean its ability to conduct electricity or heat. So outside, a stainless steel grate shining in the sun will be warm, but it's not going to be as warm as that paver right up against it. Now, because I've mentioned electropolishing, here, anyone says it's near the beach or around a pool, we always say electropolish. Now, special note for indoor pools. All pools will outgas chlorine. Indoor pools have one particular issue. So as the gas is percolating out of the water, in an outdoor pool, obviously it's going to move away. But indoor, you often do not have, especially when the pool is not being used. So in the evening, excuse me, at night when it's shut down, the pool is still outgassing this chlorine, but because it's heavier than air, it's going to settle in a thin layer, about 200 to 300 mil thick, and it'll settle around the pool, and you will have concentrations of these style of chlorine gas. Now, it will rapidly corrode most metals, it will discolor paint, and in one example I saw, it was an actual health hazard. Now, there are standards for air movement in confined spaces, or in enclosed spaces, I should say, sorry. Ignore confined, enclosed spaces, and that will allow adequate ventilation and move this chlorine gas before it forms a layer, which is then concentrated enough to eat your stainless. It'll tea-stain it massively. Outdoor pool there. Now, another one, equipotential bonding. So here's one to take with you to pub trivia when the pub's open. That's basically earthing of drains around and near pools. So why is that, you say? I hear you asking in the background. So it's covered by Australian Standard 3000. Primary reason for earthing or equipotential bonding is due to lightning for outdoor and electrical faults for both indoor and outdoor pools. So it is our policy that grates and channels ordered for pools must have an allowance for earthing or bonding, which is typically a tab that will weld on for you, or a hole so that they can be joined together. So, rule of thumb, make it easy on yourselves. Don't lose the will to live reading code like I do. If you're within, if any metal, so yeah, if you're thinking Stormtech, my stainless grates, if you're within 3.5 meters of a pool, they're to be linked together with a stainless or other non-reactive but conductive wire linking. That's called equipotential bonding, and you need that to be done by an electrician, and you need a bonding thing. So that everything, including the reinforcing steel if it's a concrete pool. So your handrails, columns, all of that good steel stuff within 3.5 meters, assume it's got to be bonded, and it goes to a junction box with an earth rod that's rammed down into the earth. Can't remember how far, is it 1.5 meters or 600 mil? But Sparky now needs to get involved. You just need to know that it's all got to be bonded. The pool builder and the Sparky need to work that out for you. Now moving on to thresholds. I'm going to throw it back to Max for this. You there, Maxie?
Hey, Troy, sorry, I was getting neck deep into some of these questions that are coming through.
Good one, mate.
All right, thresholds. Oh, goodness me.
There we go. So there I've got, for Max, we've got the, what is AS 1428 requirements for grates. That's all covered in this section here. And there are new design standards coming out. There we go. So Max, I'll let you talk through the gang with that one.
Look, thresholds for external waterproofing. Look, a threshold from an internal to an external space, podium slabs, outdoor, for decks, verandas, things like that are very important for keeping water out. Where you've got the step, generally a step down, is managed to help prevent wind-driven rain and wind-driven water, as well as allow, I guess, what is termed as freeboard to protect the internal of the building from any water that is sitting outside. Troy, I might let you talk a little bit about the level threshold, because this is your space of expertise.
Yeah, I'll hit you up on lightweight roof decks, which is coming up next. So long story short, everyone, as Max mentioned, National Construction Code, the 2022 version is up for public comment. I strongly recommend becoming familiar with it because there are some significant changes. However, it is not 2022 yet, and we have to work with what we have. So here we have NCC Volume 1, Part D3, D1, DF1, DP2. You've also got AS 4654, which has a detail for level thresholds. Summary of that is a waterproofing is above and separate to the membrane. Waterproofing above and separate to the thresholds. Oh my gosh, good on me. It's been a fun day. The threshold waterproofing, the drain is above and separate to the membrane. You're not integrating it into the membrane like you would say with a vinyl floor. And then we're back to 3500 part 5.3.1.4 for entry into buildings. So entry into buildings is a critical one. And when you've got something like a lightweight deck, and Max, I think this is one that you're best really to talk about.
Yep. So where we're looking at roof decks, look, we've seen, I think everyone will have seen a roof deck over a habitable space. This is clearly high risk construction design sort of scenario. People they're being built and designed in numerous ways. Lightweight roof decks are becoming more and more popular, but they definitely have some specific waterproofing and drainage issues. The things that make these things really challenging is generally that they're sitting over the top of living spaces. And we would strongly encourage the use of stainless steel channels on lightweight substrates exposed to high temperatures. Obviously, with the temperature ranges that rooftop deck will be exposed to, you really need to make sure that your materials are stable. And I guess if you're looking for any more information, there is a great resource in Barry Schaefer's technical article, Effects on Temperature on Waterproofing of Lightweight Decks. This will really allow you to have a bit of a deep dive into the topic, and we would strongly recommend that you get your hands on the article.
Couldn't agree more, Max. Like, just to give people a bit of context, I took a temperature probe into my car park that's got light coloured concrete, and on a hot day, the car park surface got up to 80 degrees. And Max, what's the failure point of most liquid applied, not talking about sheet, but liquid applied membranes? Isn't it something like around 50 or 60 degrees?
Yeah, it is around that point, Troy. I couldn't tell you exactly.
No, not exactly, but
yep.
I think as far as the 4858, they're tested to 56 or 54 degrees. After that, there's no guarantee, unless the manufacturer specifically has one for you. Sanitary drainage, yay, we're here. Troy loves talking about this, he just can't help himself. There we go. All right, but materials, much easier than stormwater, as there's only the following: unplasticized PVC, You can have plasticized PVC. ABS, polyprop, 300 series stainless, minimum 304, and the sheet not thinner than 1.2. And that, I don't know if anyone saw the public comment. Watermark WMTS 040 2021 came out, and then they immediately had a public comment. We want to make it out of thinner material, but as far as I know, that's gone and failed. Now, aluminium is in the list. I've updated this and I've used the wrong one again. Okay, everyone, aluminium is in this list, but WMTS 040 2021 says it should not be used when it's in contact with cement. So this comment here, everyone, I don't know how my old one came back in, but this comment here is incorrect. That was as at 2018. 2021 put aluminium back in. But building insurance will still be void if people are using aluminium as anything other than a grate. So if you're using it as a channel or tile insert style of grading, it's going to be a fail because of those alkalinity issues. So although you're allowed to do it, even the watermark says you shouldn't unless you can protect it, and the processes and steps of protecting it are riskier than simply not using it. So the code, I've got a little delay my end, so apologies everyone. There we go. So again, out of AS 3500 part 2, 4.6.7.6, removable grate. Floor waste gullies shall be installed with an accessible and removable grate. So here we have a tile insert version. Now this comment here, don't be trapped like many people have been, where the sole function of a floor waste gully is to dispose of water spillage, and this is what traps everyone. Wash down water, a minimum DN50 riser may be used. Okay, plumbing inspectors around Australia have been trapped by this one. Interpreting with the best of intentions, but wash down water doesn't mean you are having a wash. Wash down water means you're giving the wall a wash after, I don't know, the dog got in and shook dirt all over the wall and you're giving it a wash. That's pretty much the spillage. And when you're washing the room, that's when you can have a DN50 riser, not to try and shoehorn in a DN50 into a shower. So here's a straight out of the code. So that can be DN40 minimum. So minimum for your shower can be DN40. That can be DN40. They can all be DN50, DN65, DN80, DN100. But this sucker here, that is your riser, and that one is a minimum DN80. And here's a practicality for you all. Not many jurisdictions use DN80 here anymore. Most of them use DN100 for one simple reason: it's cheaper. That's the reason. And why is it cheaper? Because more of it's used. Practicality, it's easier to get your hand down a DN100 riser than it is to get your hand down a DN80. DN80 is 76.2 mil maximum, 69 mil minimum, and you've got to be really having small hands to be able to get your hand down there. Now, bit of a interpretation of that drawing. So main riser, minimum DN80, or you can put a 100 straight up there. Either side, you can go down to a minimum of DN40 for a shower. So you're not stuck with DN80 or DN100 in a shower. DN40 is suitable. If it's untrapped, as in no trap, no water trap, water seal, only 1.2 meters from the riser. If it is trapped, 2.5. Everyone, it used to be 2.4. So they've given us an extra 100 mil there. Now, more code. Just before you lose the will to live with code, here's where you get your info on individual showers. 3500, 13.17.1, individual showers, a minimum DN80 grate or channel grate, and connected by trapped or untrapped, not smaller than DN40, a trap not smaller than DN40, and for shower bases, they're to be supported in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Why? So they don't bend and flex and bugger up your waterproofing, you get water downstairs and upset the neighbours. So 13.7.2, why is this one important? So we're talking shower groups. Okay, we've got multiple showers, double showers are common now. So straight out of AS 3500, you've got how many showers, what size of grate, and the size of the discharge pipe. So very simple to put together, but most people don't actually read this bit because then we're talking about common channels. They shall be graded to outlet, and you follow this chart here. So graded to outlet means you can have a center break in the middle of your channel, or you can have a cross break, which is like the X. The practicalities, 4676 states riser not less than DN80 to finish surface level. 3, that would contravene AS 3740 for wet areas, as there's no allowance for the leak. And where can the flange go? Where can the flange go? So from that, let's not forget the code is the minimum. It's not the gold standard to aim for. It's the platform that you start from. It's the minimum. So when you're looking at the code, think about the spirit or the intent of the code, not necessarily what, you know, your dad, the builder, or Bob the plumber thinks is common practice and they've been doing it for 40 years. They might be flat out wrong with the best of intentions, but yeah, just like that. So, foundation standard. Now, AS 3500, it takes its information from a variety of sources. They don't write the plumbing code as a standalone document with no input from anywhere else. So, as far as we're related to drainage, 2018 version, I know there's a newer version out at the moment, but NCC is not referencing it just yet. But these are these parts out of the code that I've been talking about, 467, 1317, they take a lot of their info from 2887 and the old ATS 5200, which is now WMTS 040. And again, I'll send everyone out the updated one. I don't know why I've been using this one. It's 2021 version. So areas specifically in AS, it doesn't change the facts. There's only a couple of material changes like the aluminium one. 2887 part 3.2 designation of size. It solves a difference in, I'll just go back so you can, it solves a difference in DN interpretations for linear drains. So this is WMTS, so here, this one's correct, it's kind of weird. The old MP52, and as you can see, out of the foundation standard, where this one got its info and where 3500 gets its info, is this one. And it's also copied in 1589. So waterway, two waterways. We've been talking about the minimum DN80 grate and the minimum DN80 riser. The grating waterway, they are different components. One's the grate, one's the outlet. A linear waste typically has a far larger waterway than your typical waste outlet. Work out the square millimeter area of that, and then you work out the square millimeter area of that. Obviously, this is exponential compared to that one. So if, and a descriptor here, DN 150 means, okay, I've got a DN 100 rated grating over a DN 50 outlet, which would be the waste outlet in the channel or in your center waste. So DN for grates, very large waterway, as I've mentioned. Outlet is typically the limiter for a linear drain. So here we'll see in just a moment the DN for the waste outlet. So these are both the same DN50 waste outlet, and in the image I've tried to make it so they show they are actually almost identically sized. Fit for purpose. If it doesn't have a watermark, it can't be used, and this sucker here cannot be used. So you can't take the flange and throw away the grate and put a different grate on because they're watermarked as a system. These are watermarked as components and tested. there we go. The flange can't be used. This flange cannot be used without that grate. If you put, say, one of my grates over the top of this sucker, I'm fine, but you don't have a watermark certified leak control flange. And if you have any problems here, your client's home building insurance is void. So as I mentioned, in the standard, it's the minimum, not the maximum. And just because it looks okay doesn't mean it's right. My hobby's helicopters, and I can, although I think Frankie here is quite cool, I can see quite a number of things that are catastrophically wrong. So thank you very much. I'll end my screen sharing here.
That's
and we'll
great.
Go back to Jan.
Thanks so much, Troy. Look, we've got questions here, and I think it'd be good for everybody to hear some of these questions. So, Max, if you can come back on board with me, and we can all have a bit of a chat about some of the questions that have been asked. So, Bill Stainton asks, the tile system set on pedestal would be a good solution to membrane protection for the elements for rooftop recreation areas. So can you perhaps answer that? I think, yes, probably Max.
Yep. Yeah, look, it's a great solution. And it's a solution that's been around for, I mean, quite some time. I mean, a really prominent example of that solution is Parliament House. It has used this solution quite a lot with large format pavers. I think the real things to be aware of in relation to using this type of drainage system is making sure that you actually do the groundwork in relation to the system itself, because not only do you have requirements for the pavers and the gaps between to make sure there's enough space allowed to clear the water that will fall onto the pavers, but then you actually have to make sure that the structural requirements for the pavers will actually be able to hold trafficable surfaces depending on what sort of traffic, you know, if it's just foot traffic, or it still needs to be able to do that. You also have to make sure that the pedestals that the pavers sit on go with the paver, and that the pedestals are designed not to damage any membrane that sits underneath, because basically with this type of system, you have the surface layer, then you'll have a layer underneath, and the layer underneath will have the membrane, and that's where all the collection will be done and redirection towards a drain.
Right. Troy, do you have anything to add to that?
No. I think he's got it spot on. Look at it as a system. Don't look at the pedestal paving as a standalone solution for what you're doing. You've got to integrate it with the waterproofing. You've got to integrate it with maintenance. You might even have to look at your balustrade and handrail. So the parts of the building fabric that it relates to.
Okay, I know this sounds going back to basics, but we did have a couple of questions on what is a pedestal and how does it actually work? Maybe Troy, you could just fill in the information there.
Sure. The pedestal paving system is based on supporting, let's take a 600 by 600 square paver. If you want to hold that up in the air, you can do one of two things. You can put a big paver underneath it and hold it up with another one, or you can put a block on each corner and you can hold that paver up with a block. And that block is what we're calling a pedestal. Okay,
that's great. And just one more, a couple of questions asking, what does DN stand for?
Okay, DN for those French. Okay, so we have the Système International, which is what engineering and global compliance use as a standard way for us to use technical, mathematical, and many other terms. DN is a French for diametre nominal, and in Australian speak, that is defined as standard size.
Right. Okay.
So DN is simply a term used by manufacturers as a convenience out of AS 3500 Part 0 terms and definitions. DN cannot be used as a reference of measurement. It is only a descriptor of a family size fit. So we've got parts that this DN is the same as this DN, but when you measure them, they're millimeters different, but they are the same DN.
Okay.
So it's just a convenience term for manufacturers to say this goes with that. That's
okay, so that's answered those questions. Now, Amber Stewart asks, is equipotential bonding required to both indoor and outdoor pools? Troy, would you like to lead with this, and then I can go over to Max?
Yes, absolutely you can. Yeah, you need to, it's the bonding in part of the presentation, and I'll send it out to anyone that asks for it. You need it for indoor and outdoor. For outdoor for lightning, but for both indoor and outdoor if there's an electrical fault. So if one of your pool pumps, your chlorinator, something like that shorts out, that you're not electrifying your grating or your handrail.
Right, really important, I'd say. Absolutely. Neil Hill has asked, what are the requirements of slip resistance for grated drains?
Mainly in public spaces. So if you're doing domestic, you don't really have anything aside from your own personal preferences on slip resistance. Slip resistance in public areas, you typically need an R12 or a P5. And if you want to really lose the will to live, look up the slip resistance requirements out of the NCC, because it's slip resistance is not measured as scientifically as you might think. They literally get a particular brand of shoe, and for the the inclined wet thing, they basically take either shoes or barefoot, and they strap people into a harness and they get them to walk or hold their footing up a ramp until they slip over, and then they measure the angle at what that point that person slipped over. So it's not an exact science, it's just a measurement. And so we're naturally a bit conservative about slip resistance, so we make them a bit more grippy than otherwise. However, you can go too far, and if you look at some of the industrial slip resistant systems out there, they look like a cheese grater, and if you fall over it, it has exactly the same effect.
Yeah, those are the sort of things, isn't it? It's also personal safety, well, you know, public safety, I should say. Max, do you have any comments on that?
Look, the only thing I would really add to what Troy was saying is that, you know, there's requirements, and then there's just, you know, being a good person. If you've got the option to make a somewhat slippery grate not slippery, well then I'm sure at some point no one will ever thank you for it, but you'll know you've been a better person.
Right.
Okay.
Paolo Panacchia asked a question here. Now, it's a long question that I'm going to be asking you, but we've had a project where the shower drainage channel has been installed horizontally, but the drain profile channel itself has a V shape. So that while water drains to the center line of the channel, the horizontal installation means that it can sometimes hold water for long periods of time, and the water goes stagnant and smells, and clients obviously complaining. The presentation just now appeared to imply that this is allowed. I would always want to see that the whole channel graded forward to the outlets instead. Comments, question mark. So Max, would you like to start this one off, and then we can go over to Troy?
Look, actually, this is going to be a fabulous one for Troy. Sorry to handball this to you, Troy, but I know that Troy and I have actually had this exact conversation. So
great. Okay. Troy, thank you.
Okay, so WMTS 040 2021 version does not require fall in a channel. The only reference for fall in a channel is out of 3500 part 2 13.17, which is for common channels being graded to the outlet, which is the V. So Paolo, your reference to it drains to the middle, but then it's standing water, then I would suggest it's not level enough. If it drains to the center of the V of the channel, and you will get water standing in the channel, it'll coin up like beads, just like you get on the shower floor. So if you're getting a depth of water being retained in the channel, then it's not necessarily level, or there's something at the outlet stopping the water in the V free draining. I've many a time been called to site for that particular issue, and the channel's been forced onto the riser and it's been bowed like that. Doesn't need to be much. It might only be a millimetre. So you're talking tenths of a % of a degree over a distance. But that can be the reason. We radius our outlets, we make them round so that when the water gets to the outlet, it runs in easily without being retained. So points, Paolo, direct answer, no, fall is not required in a channel, and nor should it really be. If it's been installed correctly, it shouldn't be collecting. If you've got the V in there, the water should free drain. You will still get water retained in the channel in the same way that you get water on the shower floor, and it should dry at roughly the same rate. It shouldn't sit there long enough to get stagnant.
Right. Okay. That brings to a point. In fact, while I was looking at the presentation you were giving, I was thinking to myself, installation. What about installation? Installation is obviously integral and super important. Any tips for installation besides getting somebody who knows what they're doing, Troy?
Yeah, okay. So linear drain installs in the same way as a traditional centre waste. It typically, everyone from Victoria is going to throw rocks at me. Typically around Australia, except for Victoria, it's installed above and separate to the waterproofing. So you install the waterproofing first, then you put your tile bed in, or you do your tile bed screed, do your waterproofing, and then you pop in your drain and then tile. Whether you do the waterproofing under the tile bed, above the tile bed, lots of different pros and cons for both. Yeah, Maxie, we've had many chats about that, haven't we, mate? But simple installation method is go with what we've done for the last plus 100 years, and that's install your floor waste. So again, this is a floor waste above and separate to the waterproofing. That's
Beautiful. Okay.
If you've got one where you need to integrate it with the waterproofing, call me.
Okay, well, look, and that's the whole idea. Yes, I'm sure that if anybody's got any questions, we'll be able to put you in touch with each other so that you can walk people through and let them know about the products. There is one thing that you did mention, and this will also bring Max you into the situation. It's about regulations, which again are integral and important, and sometimes really confusing. Yes, come back to me. The regulations, and we're also talking today about, you know, states that all have their own regulations. Can you guide us through, you know, a journey from Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia, WA, Northern Territory, and everywhere in between? How much do they vary? And you know, how are people supposed to deal with it when they might be working in both states, a couple of states? So so Max, you first.
Yeah, look, yes, requirements do differ around the country. The high level viewpoint is the National Construction Code will provide a national minimum across the board, where we're looking at things like waterproofing or weatherproofing. So either internal inward areas or external. So I guess the eagle view will be given by the National Construction Code. As you filter down, you'll find that there'll be some places like South Australia which will have maybe have some slight variations to the standard information within the National Construction Code. But the National Construction Code, one of the things it is quite good at is allowing you to see where a state or a territory has varied from the standard, the standard, I guess, requirements that are provided within the code. So I guess first port of call is National Construction Code. if you see when you're looking in the National Construction Code that there's a little different number that usually says the same number that you're looking at, but with SA next to it, you know that when you click on that, that you'll find the different requirements in South Australia. Plumbing can be a little bit trickier, and I think I'll probably best to hand that over to you, Troy, if you've got anything you'd like to add.
Oh, just some examples. I mean, you mentioned SA, so potable water supply. So I'm a specialist in getting rid of your water, but when you talk to a plumber and you're talking about potable water supply, places like South Australia, WA, NT, outback Queensland, New South Wales as well. You've got the differences in your hard versus soft water, and that can directly impact the life of your water heater, calcification inside the water line, so your shower rose will block up or something like that. So that's just an example of where you'll get a state variation. So if you look at the NCC, it'll give you Australia, this is the standard. And then at the end of each chapter, you'll have state variations, state by state. And it'll say, replace this with that. It's a bit awkward. Yes, you've got to get used to reading it. But once you do stop losing the will to live and get your head around it, you can see your state variations. And it's a free document. You can download the sucker and read it to your heart's content. If you're having trouble sleeping, that's my go-to.
Thanks, Troy. Look, that's great. Hey, guys, we've got 3 minutes left. And so just a really quick encapsulation of the big question that I want to ask you is, what is the future of drainage? Troy.
Okay.
In a minute.
Well, it's going down the drain. I just can't live with myself. Future of drainage is bright. Now, if you look at the problems with waterproofing, if you look at the problems of leaky bathrooms and things like that, what we'll find is that drainage is being looked at in a way that it's never been looked at before. And I'm really happy to be one of those lucky suckers that just happened to be in on the ground floor when it all took off. And there aren't many of these problems that I haven't really come across before, but I love seeing new and strange things come up. And I think you'll see that drains are going to be more used to stop waterproofing and damp and things like that. Get the water away, get it away.
Perfect. And thanks for that, Troy. And Max, final word from you. We've got a minute to go.
Yeah, look, and I have to say, I agree with everything Troy said wholeheartedly. We're at a time, I think I'm going to call it a renaissance, where there's more people talking about how to move water safely away from buildings now than there has been for a long, long time. This is a really hot topic at the moment. And so keep your eyes peeled, ears open, because the things are probably about to shift in a fairly dramatic way.
Well, that sounds really exciting. I mean, obviously there's a big future in drainage. So what can I say, but Max and Troy, thank you so much. It's been really, really illuminating. And I'd like to thank everybody for participating and for your questions and for viewing. So the next session will be what's new in lighting, performance, sustainability, and more. And this will start at 3 p.m. So thanks to Troy and thanks to Max, and thanks to everybody for attending. Keep well and
it's been great.
Thank you. Bye.